Jeannie, you're on.
Good evening. We'll begin our fourth forum in a moment. We are waiting for all of the attendees to enter, so please bear with us for a minute or two. Again, we'll wait another minute for all of the residents who have registered for this fourth forum this evening to be admitted. Thank you for your patience, and we'll begin shortly. Good evening again, and welcome to the Seminary Ridge Civic Association's Forum Series. I'm Jeannie Jacob, President of the Seminary Ridge Civic Association. We're pleased to have you with us this evening for the fourth and final SRCA forum being held this May. The first three forums were for the candidates running for Alexandria City Council, and tonight's fourth forum is for the candidates vying for mayor of Alexandria. 13 of the 15 candidates who participated in the city council forums and 2 of the 3 candidates for mayor are Democrats, and they will all be running in the Democrat primary on June 8th. Early voting has already begun, and the June 8th primary is open to all registered voters in Alexandria. We hope that these 4 forums will help make you a more informed voter. I want to thank SRCA board member Joe Sestek for organizing the 4 forums and contacting all 17 candidates participating in them. Also, I thank SRCA's block captains for delivering flyers throughout the Seminary Ridge neighborhoods to promote the series. Finally, I want to thank everyone who has contributed questions for the forums. We appreciate your interest, and we have given these questions to our moderator. He will include them as time allows. Our man behind the scenes tonight, who will be monitoring the timing of the candidates' answers, is Richie Weiblinger, a Seminary Ridge resident. Our moderator for tonight's forum is Mike Souza, SRCA's former president and current parliamentarian. Mike will explain the rules for the forum, introduce tonight's candidates, and then ask them the questions that were submitted by many of you. Now, I turn the program over to Mike Souza, who will introduce tonight's 2 candidates for mayor of the city of Alexandria. Mike, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Jeannie, and good evening, and welcome to the Seminary Ridge Civic Association Mayoral Candidate Forum. My name is Michael Souza, and I'm currently serving as the SRCA parliamentarian and will serve as a moderator for this evening's discussion. With us this evening are the former Alexandria Mayor, the Honorable Allison Silverberg, and current Mayor, the Honorable Justin Wilson. My goal is to be as invisible as possible this evening and allow the candidates to make their cases directly to the residents of Seminary Ridge as to why they deserve our vote. This is not a debate, but a direct question and answer period with the candidates. Questions have been submitted in advance by Seminary Ridge residents, and I have determined which questions are most directly relevant to their concerns. As Jeannie indicated, this is the last of 4 forums hosted by SRCA. Previously, all candidates for City Council have spoken during 3 forums, which can be found on the SRCA website and on YouTube. This evening, I'm honored to provide the questions to the 2 mayoral candidates. The rules are simple for this evening. Each candidate will make an opening comment no longer than 5 minutes, highlighting the following: who you are, including how long you've lived in Alexandria, your background and experience, and any relevant personal information you wish to include. Number 2, why you're running for mayor and why you believe you are qualified to represent the citizens of the city. Number 3, what are the key goals and objectives that you wish to focus on if elected? And number 4, please end with what you think is the most important issue facing the city today. I will then ask the candidates to each address one of the submitted questions, in which they will have 1 minute to provide their response. For both the 5-minute statement and the 1-minute responses, Richie Weiblinger, our timekeeper, will hold up a yellow card at 30 seconds and a red card at 10 seconds. After both the 5-minute statement and the 1-minute answer, You will be muted unless at my discretion I wish to follow up, wish to ask a follow-up question to ensure you have directly answered the response. Follow-up questions will be kept to a minimum to ensure that we allow equal time to both candidates, maintain the schedule, and squeeze in as many questions as we can in the allotted 1 hour time frame. If the candidate wants to make a rebuttal, please raise your Zoom hand and I will give you an additional 10 seconds for clarification. I intend to alternate the questions to the candidates to ensure each has a chance to answer first and second. Ms. Silverberg will provide her introduction first, and Mr. Wilson will answer the first question. I'm excited to hear everything that you have to say and all the great ideas on how you intend to help Alexandria and Seminary Ridge continue to be the type of city that we are proud to call home. With that, let's start with the first 5-minute introduction, starting with Ms. Silverberg. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, everyone. I'm Allison Silverberg. I'm running for mayor of Alexandria. And I want to say a special thanks to the Seminary Ridge Civic Association for hosting our forum tonight. And thank you to President Jeannie Jacob and the board. And of course, thank you for your leadership, Jeannie, as well as thanks to Admiral Joe Sestak for all of his work on this, for hosting, for all of you for hosting. And Mike Souza, thank you for moderating and all the preparation that went into this. Tonight, you will hear two divergent paths forward for the future of our beautiful city. This is at the heart of what this race is all about. This race is really a contrast between two visions, one that's focused on overbuilding and versus mine, which is really focused on smart growth. And I am the smart growth candidate. It's not a question of if we will grow, and that's a good thing. The question is how we will grow. Smart growth means that we will grow at a pace that makes sense for Alexandria. As we grow, we must show respect for our diverse people, neighborhoods and civic associations, respect for our environment, respect for our numerous historic districts, and perhaps most importantly, respect for ethics and the critical role that trust, truth, and transparency play in our city government. It saddens me to hear residents express an enormous loss of trust in our city government and the decisions that have been made in the last 2.5 years. Whether it's the proposed destruction of Taylor Run, Strawberry Run, and Lucky Run, or the changes to Seminary Road, a major arterial road to our only hospital, or the idea of putting housing on our limited school properties when we should be focused on educating our children, or the approval of a slaughterhouse that will open any day now. Integrity is key to civil discourse. Trust is earned by telling the truth, and trust is harmed when the truth is hidden, distorted, or redacted. We can and must do better as a city to value our residents and the wisdom that they bring to our civic discourse. We may not always agree on the solutions to the issues facing our city, but we should not marginalize or dismiss voices that don't agree with our point of view. In the years ahead, I envision Alexandria to remain a welcoming, embracing, and forward-looking, as well as diverse community that values the quality of life and inclusion for all our residents. I envision a city that has invested in its infrastructure and protects its residents from flooding of our streets and homes. I envision Alexandria to be a community that has balanced density with open space rather than engaged in an unending pursuit of overbuilding. I envision a city that has actually lived up to its eco-city moniker by preserving its woodland forests and increasing its tree canopy to 40%. I envision a city that enjoys a Potomac River that is free from the sewage that we've dumped into it for decades. We have large challenges and opportunities ahead in the coming years, and we must make smart decisions that will benefit current residents and future generations of Alexandria. And I look forward to the discussion tonight. And as many of you know, I served as vice mayor and then as mayor, and I've lived here since 1989, and I have a lifetime of public service. And I ask for your vote on June 8th. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Silverberg. Mr. Wilson, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Justin Wilson. I'm the mayor of the city of Alexandria, and I'm so proud to serve you. I want to thank Mike and Jeannie and Richie and Congressman Joe for organizing this debate, and the entire Seminary Ridge family for putting this together and helping educate the community. Former Mayor Silverberg, I want to thank you for being back again. I look forward to a lively conversation this evening about the important issues that face this city. You know, this is ultimately the last debate. It's the last debate before the voters make their final decisions about who will lead our community over the next 3 years. I'm looking forward this evening to hearing your questions, hearing your ideas, fielding as many questions as I can get to, and ultimately I ask for your vote in the June 8th primary. My very first salary job was actually at a place that some of you who've lived here a while might remember, Heckinger's. And after starting out as a front end loader and a cashier, I ultimately ended up at the service desk. And those who know what happens at the service desk, it's where people who have had their most frustrating experience at the store come to the service desk looking for redress. And my job was to take folks who were pretty unhappy customers and turn them around, solve their problem, and ultimately give them some customer satisfaction. That's the same skill set I've taken to work on the city council for over a decade, and as your mayor for the last 2.5 years, working together with the community to resolve problems and make our community a better place. I got my start in the civic life about 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, as a civic association president in our city, working with my neighbors to make our neighborhood a better place to live and to work. You know, I'm proud of what we have weathered as a community over the past 2.5 years. We have faced the most significant public health crisis in 100 years head on, building partnerships for testing, vaccinations, eviction prevention, food assistance, and giving our small businesses a chance to survive this moment. We have also at the same time advanced long and tractable challenges facing our community. Finally, developing a plan for the redevelopment of Landmark Mall, bringing a new hospital to Landmark, a badly needed public health resource. Finishing the metro station at Potomac Yard, which is going to open in 11 months, creating nearly 1,000 units of affordable housing. Finally, on track by 2025 to end the overflow of raw sewage in our Potomac River. We are going to build 5 new schools over the next decade to address our capacity needs. We have just made the largest ever investment in ending flooding all throughout our neighborhoods. And we approved the most aggressive climate change policy in our region. But elections are ultimately about the future. They're about what's next. And I believe that Alexandria must lead the recovery. And I believe that the way we lead that recovery is by investing in our kids, investing in our infrastructure, and growing our local economy. I believe that our kids have borne some of the worst of the last year in this pandemic. We need to commit the resources to address the social, emotional, and academic loss that our kids have suffered. Making sure that we expand early childhood education so that every child starts kindergarten with an early childhood experience, expanding the quality and access of after-school services, and making sure we advance the infrastructure investments in our school enrollment capacity. I believe that we need to continue and accelerate the investments in our infrastructure, our roads, our sewers, our sidewalks, our municipal facilities, our broadband infrastructure, our housing. And while we've made significant investments in that basic infrastructure, I believe there's one thing we have left out, and that's our parks, our open space, and our recreation facilities. We need to commit resources to make sure that Alexandria, which currently lags behind our neighbors in our parks, our playgrounds, and our recreation facilities, has first-class facilities for our residents. And that's an important investment we need to take on in the next 3 years. But we can't afford any of this unless we have the resources necessary. And so making sure our economy responsibly grows, recovering our consumption-based businesses that have been hit so hard by this pandemic so that we have the revenues to provide the services our residents expect and demand. That has to be one of our highest priorities. My parents brought me to my first home in the city of Alexandria shortly after I was born, the greenhouse in the city's West End. My wife grew up a stone's throw from Seminary Ridge on Duke Street and played in Strawberry Run as a child. My mom lives on the West End. Both my kids were born in the city, one in Alexandria Hospital, one on the way to Alexandria Hospital. My family has a long-term commitment to this city, and I'm running for re-election to make sure that this is a better place to live, work, and raise a family long into the future. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to your questions. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much, both of you, for those opening statements. And now to the first question, and we will start with you, Mr. Wilson. The last city council ignored the 13 Alexandria Civic Associations that were all opposed to road diet to Seminary Road. What do you see as the role of civic associations in the city policymaking process?
Well, first of all, I don't believe that we rejected or ignored the input of the civic associations. I believe the input of the civic associations was very valuable throughout the process in helping modify and change ultimately what was approved by the city council. The options, the several alternatives that went through that process of determining the future of Seminary Road were modified multiple times due to input that was provided through the process. But it is true that in the end, the decision that I made, the decision that 3 of my colleagues made on the city council was different than some of the input that we received from members of the community. And it's unfortunate we couldn't get everyone in the community on the same page on this issue. It was a divisive issue. My priority in that issue was making sure that we protect pedestrians and we add pedestrian infrastructure. So we have 2 faith communities, a very large neighborhood with a lot of residents that live around there, schools nearby. And we had a situation where we didn't even have a sidewalk going on the westbound side of a major arterial road. We didn't have safe pedestrian crossings across Seminary Road. And so I believe the improvements that we made were good ones. And I'm hopeful that in the future, we can continue to tweak as necessary. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Ms. Silverberg.
Thanks. This has been a very divisive issue in our community, but in fact, 13, as you mentioned in your question, Mike, 13 civic associations from across our whole city came together as never before. They've never agreed about really anything in their lives, but they agreed about this, and that is that this is a major arterial road that leads to our only hospital. And that's just a fact. And when you're rushing to the hospital, either by ambulance or by car, minutes matter, actually seconds matter. And I've seen it, and many residents have seen it and told me about it, that they've seen ambulances stuck. Now they have a siren. When you're driving in your own car with a loved one who's ailing, you don't have a siren. So even the ambulances are stuck. So look, I think we have a chance to right this wrong and of course keep the pedestrian improvements. But I wouldn't have voted for it, and I will restore the travel lanes if I can get everyone together on that.
All right, thank you. Question number 2. Many Alexandrians believe that they have no meaningful voice in city development or traffic-related matters, obviously citing Seminary Road process as an example. How specifically will you act to restore confidence in the city administrative process, specifically between council and city staff, and ensure that the voices of citizens are heard and actually taken into consideration by city staff? Start with you, Ms. Silverberg.
Okay, thank you. This is an important issue. I'm such a firm believer in civic engagement. Open mic is a matter that I fought for. Actually, my opponent led the effort to reduce open mic that had been in place for over 40 years. We used to have it so that anyone could speak for up to 3 minutes, and now it's limited to the first 15. So then the rest have to wait until at the end of the whole public hearing or the whole meeting. That's just not right. We need more engagement. My meetings didn't run nearly as long as my opponents, actually, which had been stated previously. But the fact is that civic engagement is a great thing. And if we're a democracy, which we are, we should welcome it and embrace it. And that when people come and speak, we should be listening. And I am an active listener. Everyone knows this. So I think this is a really important issue. We've seen in some of the FOIAs that have come through that sometimes there's not really respect for some of the residents, and that's not right. And if I'm elected, I will restore the public trust.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I came out of civic association. I was a civic association treasurer, civic association president, served on the board of served on the federation as a civic association representative. And so I come out of that mindset. And so civic engagement has always been first of mind to me, and making sure that the public has their say the change the former mayor referenced was actually to ensure that the public had their say on items that were before the council, so that we prioritize public input from our residents who are coming to speak about very important issues that are before us. And that's been my focus. As we move forward, coming out of the pandemic, I believe we have an opportunity to actually keep some of the improvements we put in place from the pandemic. We've actually expanded public testimony during the pandemic. We've had residents who have testified from the sidelines of soccer games, of their kids' soccer games. We've had folks participate from vacations and still participating in these items. And I'd actually like to keep that in place, allowing folks to provide virtual public comment forever. I don't think that's something that should go away after the pandemic. So I'm firmly committed to expanding civic engagement. It's my background, and it's what I hope to continue as your mayor.
All right, thank you. Given the off-combative nature surrounding the Seminary Road, the next big transportation study and project will be the transit lanes on Duke Street. What is your opinion of the installation of dedicated transit and bicycle lanes on this major east-west thoroughfare, either during the initial phase 1 implementation or later during phase 2 of the project, specifically between Landmark area and King Street Metro? Should the city acquire private property to achieve this goal? Start with Mr. Wilson, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So this plan was ultimately approved by a citizen work group before I came on council. It is an old plan. It's one that is about a decade old. And so we're actually getting started right now in the public engagement to really refresh this plan and determine what makes sense to do in 2021 now that we have financing in place. I personally don't think the volumes on Duke Street would allow us to remove any traffic lanes on Duke Street. I don't believe that's something that I would support. So ultimately, I think you're going to have a situation where we're able to run transit in sometimes in mixed traffic and sometimes in dedicated lanes with using right-of-way that we're able to acquire. I think this is an incredible opportunity for the city to add a significant amount of east-west transit capacity, which should hopefully cut down on some of the cut-through traffic that we have in our city and provide new alternatives for residents to get around. So I'm strongly supportive of expanding transit, and I think how we ultimately do that, we're going to have a lot of community engagement to figure out the best alignment, as well as looking at the intersections to try to reduce some of the cut-through traffic that we see in a lot of our neighborhoods. Thanks for the question.
All right, thank you. Ms. Silverberg, please.
This is really an important question because really the choke point of that area, and one of the biggest choke points for sure in our whole city, is really at Telegraph Road, where Duke meets up with Telegraph Road. And really we should be looking at a way with working with VDOT to expand that. That's really where our focus should be. I understand from Jan Lambert, our transportation director, who said publicly on a Zoom meeting that he said, quote, "There are no plans to add capacity at Telegraph." And he said, "There's a choice between roadway capacity or investments in transit, and the city's made a decision to invest in transit." I agree with transit investments, but I also think this is the choke point. Telegraph needs VDOT's help, with the city's help, to focus on that. That's just common sense. I don't support taking away a lane of Duke Street. And so let's just be clear about that. But I do think we need to focus on our roadway improvements. Absolutely.
All right, thank you. And you actually lead right into the next question, which is the main source of congestion on Duke Street corridor is the ramp leading to eastbound Duke to southbound Telegraph Road. What is your position on making improvements, for example, making it 2 lanes to the Duke Street Telegraph interchange? Alternately, would you be in favor of a connector between Duke Street and Eisenhower Valley? So start with you, Ms. Silverberg.
When I served as mayor between 2016 and 2018, we actually looked at this corridor very carefully, and I felt it was important for us to reach out to VDOT. There's a lot of buzz back on I can hear from you somewhere out there. Anyway, that VDOT, it would take years, but I said we should just go ahead and move forward and reach out to them. We also came up with the idea of going under the bridge that leads to Telegraph Road, and as you go east on Duke Street and make that first left onto the on-ramp there. And so you go just a little further on Duke, and that would alleviate some congestion. So again, I'm not in favor of turning Duke Street into putting in a bus lane or even a bike lane there. And So as far as the connector, we actually had that discussion 15 or 20 years ago. It would actually create enormous traffic for a lot of residential streets, as the cut through traffic would really increase in Alexandria. So it was really a heated discussion. We can, we can always discuss any issue, but the fact is that putting in another cut through street means it's like.
All right, thank you. Mr. Wilson.
I think we can absolutely look at the capacity of the telegraph ramp, but I think we do have to be very careful because right now that telegraph ramp is a very attractive place for cut through traffic from Clover and Taylor Run. And I think we have to be, if we are adding capacity to that ramp, we have to make sure we don't provide a perverse incentive to increase the cut through that is going through Clover and Taylor Run. So I think we need to couple that, any capacity additions we do, with additional turn restrictions and other ways to prevent it from making an even more attractive way to cut through some of our residential neighborhoods. As far as the connector, I'm always happy to consider additional things that are going to ultimately assist our transportation challenges. I think it's going to be challenging to find right away. It's going to be challenging to find a site that enjoys broad-based community support. But if we can identify a way to provide increased connectivity to the Eisenhower Valley, particularly as it continues to develop, I'm certainly open to those ideas. Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Next question. Presently, the review team to the stream restoration alternatives for Strawberry Run will include only city staff, the city EPC committee, and probably the city's contractors for Taylor and Strawberry Run. Would you support including a scientific representative chosen by the Strawberry Run residents for the review team, or having an objective third party conduct this review to ensure the results are credible? We'll start with Mr. Wilson, please.
You were breaking up a little bit on that, but I think I heard most of that question. Absolutely, I'm committed to making sure that we have a broadly inclusive process and as we review this. I think ultimately the goal is to improve the stewardship of our natural spaces around the city and address really decades of human-caused impact on some of our urban streams. That's what led to our ultimately to our stream assessment, which said that we had some real challenges in a lot of our urban streams in the city that have been caused by really decades of mismanagement of our natural spaces and of our watersheds. And so I think we have an opportunity to improve. I'm committed to making sure that process is as broadly inclusive and science-based as we can get, and we'll make sure we have all the experts involved from our community as we go forward. So I think we wanted to use the Environmental Policy Commission as that sounding board. That was what we heard from residents throughout the process, was the EPC was the body we should listen to. There's a lot of really good science minds on that commission, but the more the merrier as we go through this process. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Silverberg.
Right. Well, let's be clear. I've been right out front on this issue about Taylor Run, Strawberry Run, and Lucky Run. I had a column in the Alexandria Times last September about this issue, that I really want us to save the forests of Taylor Run, Strawberry Run, and Lucky Run. And I would totally support having an expert like John Fields, Dr. John Fields, and the help of the Environmental Council of Alexandria, which I'm proud that they endorsed me. And so to me, we must save our few remaining forests. The city's plan, up until very recently, they weren't even going to look at testing the soil of Taylor Run. They were basing all their analysis on data based on farmland in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, because they have agricultural runoff, there's phosphorus. Someone with their own money tested the soil at Taylor Run, sent it to a reputable lab, and it showed negligible amounts of phosphorus. This is not going to move the needle on the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So to me, with our few remaining forests, we must work to save and protect them.
All right, thank you. Next question. Virginia's Department of Transportation has identified 6 intersections near I-395 as high accident rate areas, all of them in Alexandria's low-income communities, such as West Seminary Road and the Mark Center Avenue outside of Southern Towers. Would you advocate for state and federal funding to reconfigure these roadways and the intersections for traffic safety? Start with Ms. Silverberg, please.
I'm all in favor of doing all we can to increase pedestrian safety. We approved Vision Zero action plan while I was mayor. I spoke on the Hill about it actually as well. We were the third jurisdiction, or one of three jurisdictions, to quickly approve a Vision Zero action plan in our region. So absolutely, we should be looking at all those issues. It's been a deep concern. We've actually made improvements through the years, but we absolutely must look at that and continue to work hard. This was the problem, really, that we should have been focused on, rather than the stretch of road between the Seminary Road Diet focused on. That road was actually one of the safest stretches of road in our city. And the mayor kept saying that it was an unsafe piece of road. The city's own data showed that it was one of the safest in our city. So we need to look at our data.
All right, thank you. Mr. Wilson, please.
To answer your question, absolutely. The city's traditional path has been to look at roads when they're scheduled for repaving. And so as we approach all of these streets for repaving, we engage with the community, as we are doing now on several streets, to determine what challenges residents see in their neighborhoods, what problems exist, and work to identify solutions. And I think we do need to draw on federal and state resources, as we have done successfully in many, many cases around our city, to try to improve the safety of these areas and reduce the number of crashes. That was the intent behind the Vision Zero Action Plan, our Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan, and all of our approach to our Complete Streets plan as well. All of our approach to how we look at these streets as we move forward. So absolutely, I'd certainly be committed to that. And as we've made requests of the federal government and the state over the last 3 years, we have included these kind of improvements in our requests. So hopefully we can continue to leverage those resources as we move forward.
All right, thank you. A little bit different topic here. Would you vote in favor of eliminating single-family zoning in Central Alexandria, the West End, or citywide in order to add more housing and increase density? Please explain why or why not.
I live in a single-family home. I'm sitting in one right now. I wouldn't support eliminating my home or eliminating single-family zoning. I do believe that like any zone that we have in the city, it's a constant evolution and one that changes over time. The city makes zoning changes affecting the entire city frequently as we tweak and evolve over time. So while I wouldn't suggest eliminating single-family zoning as a construct, I do believe there are continued changes. We recently made changes approving the accessory dwelling unit ordinance to ultimately allow intergenerational living situations, allowing disabled children and family members to live proximate to their families, as well as folks to rent out legally their basement and other parts of their home, or allow a family member to live in their basement or other part of their home. And that was a tweak to the single family zoning. So while we're not eliminating single family zoning as a construct, and I don't support that as the stability of our neighborhoods are very, very important, I think we can continue to evolve our zoning as we move forward to fit the needs of today.
Thank you. Ms. Silverberg.
Thanks. Look, let's just look at some of the facts. 29% of our city is single family zoning. 29%. The rest of it is multifamily. So no, I don't support changing that. And I don't think it really needs to evolve. Do we need more affordable and workforce housing? Absolutely. And while I was mayor, we tripled the dedicated funding for the Affordable Housing Fund. I'm very proud of that. And I should have mentioned that at the opening, but it's just as a revolutionary and visionary historic vote. It was a split vote, 4-3, and my opponent actually did not vote for it. And in fact, his motion on the floor was to not only not vote for the tripling, he wanted to zero out what was there for the dedicated funding of the Affordable Housing Fund. And where would we be? The key to it is really liquidity, and that's what we did.
All right, thank you. Next question is, we'll start with Mr. Wilson. What approach do you support to increase housing and affordable housing in Alexandria? For example, should there be government-owned and managed housing, or should the city continue to grant developers variances in return for including temporary affordable units?
I'm happy to answer it. I think former Mayor Silverberg was first on this one, but if you want me to go first, I can go first.
Yeah,
Oh.
no, go ahead. I'm sorry about that. My bad.
Should I? Yes, Mike?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks, Justin. All right. Well, I feel so strongly about affordable workforce housing, and I really believe we must preserve and protect our affordable housing that's existing. When we redevelop it, we need to make sure that we still have what we had when we started. A great example of that is the Parkstone on the West End, where they have, well, I don't know exactly how many units, but they've preserved and protected it while they've added to the market rate units. But contrast that to the Newport Village units on the West End at Braddock and Beauregard. They have currently 24 affordable housing units, and the idea is to preserve and protect them, but the council voted to redevelop it with the developer, and now it'll be 383 units. Imagine that increase in density. And they didn't even protect and preserve the 24 units. Now there will be 12 affordable units. So we need to do a better job at preserving and protecting existing, kind of like Lacey did with, so that's the AHDC project building in Delray Rosemont, and Parkstone is on the West End, and AHDC also. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Specific to your question, the answer is all of the above. I don't think we can take tools off the table in order to create and preserve affordable housing. And that's certainly been my approach as a member of council and as mayor. We use density bonuses as a way to create and improve affordable housing. The city council actually just recently increased the amount that we accept or the amount that we demand out of developers for additional affordable housing when we do development. Ultimately, there is a balance between how much you can demand before a project is no longer viable and the project doesn't happen. If you require too much, then ultimately it doesn't happen, as happened in the Beauregard plan, where we're sadly losing all of the market rate affordable housing in the Beauregard plan because we asked for too much. And the developer decided it wasn't worth it to move forward. I'm proud of that we've had multiple award-winning affordable housing projects that have been approved during my tenure, including the Asana project on the West End, which was actually the first to use the Amazon funding, and a JBG Social Equity Enterprise Fund, which is providing that public-private partnership to create new housing.
All right, thank you. The next question is, would you support a requirement that city staff obtain community support before applying for state or federal grants that impact transportation, infrastructure, or the environment? Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, absolutely. So our staff cannot apply for a grant to any state agency or federal agency without the approval of the city council, and the city council elected representatives of the community. So on almost every council docket, including the one that we had last Tuesday night, there are multiple grant applications that are up for approval that require approval from the council. On some of them, on the minor $5,000 to $100 here or there, they pass without any discussion. On some that are multi-million dollars, we have discussion and community input. And in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we actually pulled back on a grant for Upper King Street to allow the community to provide additional input, and we'll go back in the future once we've received that additional input. So I think I've certainly been committed to making sure that there's broad-based community support as we leverage these funds. But I have to say, this is one of the ways that we ease the burden on our local taxpayers, is by aggressively seeking federal and state funds to prevent having to go to local taxpayers for some of these community amenities that are so important to our community: transportation, environmental, schools, housing, et cetera. We aggressively use these funds.
All right, thank you. Ms. Silverberg.
Great, thanks, Mike. Well, first of all, we first need to let the citizens know, let our residents know, and the civic associations know that we're doing it. So absolutely, we need more community engagement. There isn't really hardly any. These grant applications come before the council. They're usually on consent. We need to have them off of consent. But a number of projects come forward without community engagement. There is a in one of the staff memos regarding Taylor Run, Strawberry Run, and Lucky Run in the fall of 2018, it did say it should come back. If the community objects, then we would reconsider. But when we actually approved that grant application, there was no granularity, no specifics. It was just about approving something to help the Chesapeake Bay watershed that we all want to protect, but no mention of natural channel design. So to me, it's a mistake to move forward with that, but it should take into account the community input. Absolutely.
Right. Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you, Ms. Silverberg. Do you think the city should continue to have a strong unelected city manager, or should the city's charter be revised to create a full-time, fully empowered mayor and city council responsible to the residents? Please explain.
Well, it would take a charter change. I've not been asked that question before, so here we are. But I would just say, Mike, that it's important to have community engagement on that. That would be a big decision. I know that when I served as mayor, I was more than full-time. I was about 16 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. But that's a huge community conversation. To me, in reality, it is a full-time role. So as far as the city manager's role, I think that there should be more conversation about his role and the accountability of his role, and how is he accountable? And so we can have that conversation. I would certainly welcome the community's input on that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, thank you. There's only one jurisdiction in Virginia that has a strong mayor, and it's the city of Richmond. And they had that charter change process several years ago to do that. I would not at this point support any change from the council manager form of government. I think the council manager form of government serves to insulate the bureaucracy from the politics, and serves, and I think that has a significant benefits to the community from an ethical government perspective, and preventing some of the fraud, waste, and abuse that we see in other communities. And so I think there's a considerable benefit to the council manager form of government. As far as whether we would need a full-time council or full-time mayor, it's certainly always been a full-time position for me during my 10.5 years on city council. And I have balanced 2 full-time jobs throughout that time, but it's certainly full-time hours. And I think as far as whether we should pay it full-time, I think there is considerable benefit to having members of council who are living the lives that our residents live, working out in our community, and going to work every day. And I think that gives me good experience to help me on the city council.
All right, thank you. The next question also relates to the city manager. The city manager makes almost 25% more than the vice president of the United States. Do you think this level of compensation is appropriate, especially for a city staff employee who is not directly accountable to the voters? Start with you, Mr. Wilson. Yeah,
absolutely. The city council annually sets the salary of the city manager, and we do so when we carefully consider both the city manager's performance as well as comparative salaries around the region. The city manager is neither a leader nor a laggard in his salary among the region. He's one of the most senior city managers that lead in this region, and he remains in the middle of the pack of salaries for his counterparts across the region. I believe he's competitively paid. I believe he's appropriately paid. I don't think there is a challenge there given the organization that he is running.
Do you think that his accountability to directly to residents could be better?
I mean, as we discussed in the earlier question, we have a council manager form of government. It is the council is structured as a board of directors for the city's municipal corporation. We are accountable to the residents of our city, and we in turn hold the city manager accountable through his annual review process, through our compensation decisions, and ultimately through the decision to hire and fire. And so that is the council's decision, and we operate at the behest of the public.
All right, thank you. Ms. Silverberg.
Well, it's a great question. We do have that conversation as a council in executive session every year. We do review his role and how he's performing. In this case, Vola Lawson, 15-year city manager. But I do think that it is a lot of money, frankly. I definitely think that, and I've brought this up, but nobody agreed with me. It is standard for the city manager to get a car allowance. It sounds minor, but I don't think we should have that for him. I think we should revise that, and same for the city attorney. That's about $8,000 or $9,000 a year, sort of a bonus. But I just think that it's just shouldn't be part of the package. I think that these issues should be looked at, frankly, in terms of compensation. We should look at it in terms of, yes, he should be in the middle of the pack, but by the same token, maybe we can do things a little differently, given our, the economic times in which we live. And he should be more accountable, as we saw with the Potomac Yard Metro.
All right, thank you. We'll start with Ms. Silverberg in this question. What is your position on co-location of affordable housing on ACPS property? Would you support an ordinance or formal policy statement that bars co-locating housing on ACPS grounds?
Well, I want to protect our limited school properties from housing. Regardless of what kind of housing. Housing does not belong on our limited school properties. Our school properties are meant for educating our children and for their recreational needs as well. We are already bursting out at the seams in terms of school capacity. We've had a school capacity issue for years. We've been working on it, and I'm proud to have worked on it as well. But the fact is that it really complicates matters. And so I would certainly support an ordinance to say no to putting housing on our limited school properties.
All right, thank you. Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, I don't support putting affordable housing on our existing school properties. We are having a conversation around whether on some of our new school properties, particularly on Potomac Yard, where we have the current city's master plan actually has affordable housing and the school site sharing the same block. Whether they would be co-located or not is still to be determined. So we are having a conversation there. But ultimately, on our existing school sites, we need more instructional space. I've worked very hard to build coalitions on the council to put together funding for 5 new schools over the next decade. And we're going to need that instructional space, as well as some of the complementary uses around recreation, health, some of those opportunities where we can put on the same site opportunities to serve our kids. We're having a conversation right now at Mini Howard about whether we include a pool, finally addressing the need for a 50-meter competition pool at the Mini Howard site. And that's currently a proposal that requires additional funding. We're going to talk about it on June 9th at the council meeting about whether we can find funding to make that happen. I think that's the kind of co-location opportunity that makes sense for us moving forward on our existing school sites.
All right, thank you. Next question is, the city of Alexandria is receiving $60 million in federal COVID relief funding. How would you propose the city best utilize these funds? Starting with you, Mr. Wilson, please.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we had a long fight to make sure we got that money. There was some last minute hitches where some of the independent cities in Virginia were under attack and potentially going to lose a lot of that money. And I worked with my counterparts around the Commonwealth, as well as with our congressional delegation, to make sure we got the full amount we were entitled to. But we are now getting about $60 million. Our schools are getting a whole bunch of additional money as well, bringing us to a total of well over $100 million in addition to what we might get from the state. And so this is an incredible opportunity for the city. We're still deciphering the 130 pages of rules that came out from the Treasury Department about what we're allowed to use these monies for. But my focus is on making infrastructure investments, basic infrastructure, particularly in our sewers and our flooding capacity, as well as investing in some of these systems that are going to last us for generations. I think we should not take any easy way outs on this money and using it for fleeting investments. We have an opportunity to make generational investments in our community, around our infrastructure, around our facilities, around some of the systems, around workforce development and things that are going to ultimately benefit our community for generations. And so I'm hopeful we will take that opportunity. We got 1,300 suggestions from the community, and we're going to be working in June and July to apply those suggestions and figure out how to use that first tranche of money.
Thank you. Ms. Silverberg.
This is a once in a lifetime investment from the federal government, and we need to be extremely careful and good stewards of this money. And we need to think about what is mission critical. So first and foremost, I think we clearly have to focus like a laser beam on this flooding, this sewage and stormwater flooding. that's attacking and stalking really our residents every time it rains. That just like last night, that they're not comforted by knowing that everything's going to be okay. They're worried. They're worried that it's on their iPhone that it's going to rain or that a storm appears. We need to address our short-term and long-term fixes. Clearly, our schools, thank goodness, are also getting funding, and that's fantastic. We need that because we need to focus on school capacity issues. So as far as other needs, I still would focus first and foremost on the infrastructure. And clearly, we do need to repave a lot of our roads as well. But we have to really work on this sewage and stormwater flooding issue first and foremost. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Next question will start with you, Ms. Silverberg. Do you support returning to a ward system whereby the city would be divided into equally sized areas and each would elect a resident of that ward to the city council, perhaps with 1 or 2 at-large council members? Please explain.
Well, this has come up in conversation really in the last year or two. And I think it's a conversation we can have as a community. And I'd like to hear more about that from various parts of the city. There are certainly some good points being made on both sides. If anything, I certainly believe that we must have improved representation across the city. Anything that we can do to improve representation, that's a great thing. That's what democracy is about. As far as the ward system, at the very, the only thing that I can say is I think the hybrid approach is something to consider, but we'd have to really weigh all sides on this and decide if that's really for us and look at best practices across the country as well.
All right, thank you. Mr. Wilson.
I think before taking on an issue of this magnitude, we would need to have a considerable study. A few days ago, we lost a former delegate, Dick Hobson, who actually chaired one of the last election reform groups that we constructed here in the city nearly 20 years ago that looked at a whole variety of election and council reform initiatives and came with their recommendations. I'm not reflexively opposed to awards, but I do have some concerns about some of the parochialism that can happen in those constructs around the country. And so I'd want to balance that with some of the benefits. I think we also have to look at some of the history about why we went away from awards originally and what realities exist today and what problems we're ultimately trying to resolve. I think I've always viewed myself as someone who's been an at-large council member and now an at-large mayor, as someone who represents our entire city and serves the entire city. And I think my colleagues see it that way as well. But ultimately, if we go through a community process and we see a broad support for a different solution, we can have a conversation with the General Assembly about possibly making different changes.
All right, thank you so much. Next question. Would you support term limits for city council? If yes, how many terms? If not, why not? Mr. Wilson.
Well, I have a term limit imposed in my house by the woman I share the house with. So it is a very strict term limit that will be strictly enforced. The voters also have a way of imposing term limits as well on elected officials. I prefer to allow the elected officials, or sorry, the voters to decide when elected officials should and should not serve, and I think that's probably the best approach.
Thank you, Ms. Silverberg. Same question.
I think the voters decide by what, their reaction to the elected leadership. So I'm totally fine with that. So
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. As you know, there's a perception that the city council and current and city staff lack transparency. Would you support both the city council members and senior city staff signing a pledge to uphold specific ethical standards to support full transparency in city business, including making all texts and discussions between council members and staff public under a FOIA? Start with Mr. Silverberg.
Well, I'm a great proponent of transparency, and I led in my mayoral term in January 2016 with an ethics initiative And actually we passed something and that was good, but my initiative was far more robust and it was actually watered down by my opponent tonight. So with all due respect, so that's unfortunate. I just signed recently in the last month or two, the constituent Bill of Rights, which includes some of this discussion, frankly, Mike. So I'm all for more transparency. We have an ethics pledge that we signed, but I did sign the Bill of Rights, and it talks a lot about how we don't just need to disclose and recuse. We shouldn't be accepting money from those who bring business before the city. And I've had a long time policy the whole time that I've served, and saying no to developer money. They don't even give me money anymore. So, but I've always been gracious about it, and I appreciate it. But I think it's a huge conflict of interest. So
Sure. And specifically back regarding city staff, you know, how do we bring staff into that process as well?
Well, I think that the staff works very hard, but I think they should be held to a very high standard in terms of ethics and transparency as well. So I'm comfortable with that.
All right, thank you.
And then-
Mr. Wilson.
And also, Mike,
Yeah,
I think we should sign that. Go ahead.
Is it my turn?
I think they should sign the pledge as well. Absolutely.
Sure. All right, thank you. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. You know, transparency has been a major focus of my time on council. So I don't take campaign contributions from folks who have business before the council. I also don't take gifts from anyone who has any business before the council. I've also been committed since even before I was on council to expanding transparency in government. Alexandria became the first jurisdiction at my initiative to put our campaign finance reports online. Alexandria became the first jurisdiction in Virginia at my initiative to put our financial interest disclosures. And in fact, I believe we're still the only jurisdiction that puts their financial interest disclosures showing what each individual member of council has in their financial interests and what potential conflicts of interest might be out there. Alexandria was the first jurisdiction to put, at my initiative, our internal audit reports online. My view is that when we're having FOIAs, it's because we haven't put enough online. So I would like to accelerate the number of things we are actually putting online so that folks don't have to FOIA. I think those are the kinds of things, those are the kind of initiatives I've advanced during my time on council, expanding how we account to the public for executive session. That was a part initiative I put in the city's adoption as well. So I think those are the focus I would have.
All right, thank you.
Mike, if I could just say.
Sure, 10 seconds.
So, yeah, I just think we all have to just look at each other's VPAPs to see the Virginia Public Access, whatever it's called, vpap.org, to see who's given who money through the years. And you'll see that I haven't taken funding from the developers, and frankly, my opponent for years has. But regardless of that, the redacting, over 80 pages of redacted pages, totally blackened, came back when the residents put in a FOIA request regarding Seminary Road. And,
sure, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wilson, 10 seconds.
Yeah, first of all, again, no matter what suggestions are, I do not take money from people who have business before the council. And yes, you can check VPAP and look for that. And the city's redaction policies today are the exact same that they were when former Mayor Silverberg was the mayor.
Sure. All right, and now, because we're running up against the 8 o'clock time, and you know, we got one last question, and we'll close on out with this one. So what do you, as a candidate, hope to achieve for the city of Alexandria 5 years from now? Let's start with Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. I mentioned this in my opening. You know, as I said, we have done great investments in our school facilities, our basic infrastructure, our sewers, our sidewalks, our roads, our municipal facilities. But the one area we have really left behind has been our parks, our recreation, and our open spaces. And so we have wonderful plans, the small park plan, the large park plan, the pocket park plan. And every time we do a survey of our community, we find that folks want better parks, they want better playgrounds, they want better trails, they want community gardens, they want these kind of resources. And so I think over the next couple of years, we need to work together and figure out how we leverage the resources, potentially outside resources, but also local taxpayer dollars to actually accelerate and implement these plans. This is a place where we haven't seen a lot of investment, and we have a real opportunity to go forward and take care of that. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Silverberg?
Right. Well, while I was mayor 2016 through 18, we renovated 8 city parks and Warwick Pool. We got a lot done. So I certainly would roll up my sleeves and do so again. But we've been through a harrowing year because of the pandemic. But I would definitely envision a city that attracts small and large businesses, that add jobs and enrich our unique character of our community. I envision a city that's a careful steward of our taxpayers' assets and money, and that we wisely allocate and monitor our capital improvement program dollars. That I envision a city that makes wise investment from the millions of dollars that are coming through from the federal government. We have a lot of challenges, but really these are great opportunities as well for our city, and we need to build back better. So look forward.
All right, thank you so much. We appreciate, it's been an absolute pleasure to be a moderator for this discussion this evening. I want to thank both of you for joining, and all the residents for listening in. I think this was a very productive and informative session. We have a lot of issues facing our city, and hearing your thoughts and opinions will help all of us be better informed voters. Jeannie, over to, oh, we gotta bring Jeannie back in here. Richie, do you self-control?
No, you took it back, Mike. I think.
Oh, I did. All right.
If you want to give it back to me, I can burn it.
Okay, yeah. Okay. All right, bring Janie back in. And she'll close this out.
All right, she's coming back.
All right, thank you, Jeannie.
Technology. I want to thank both Justin and Allison for sharing their time with us this evening. The residents of Seminary Ridge greatly appreciate your willingness to be here with us and to share your reasons for running for mayor. Also, thank you to everyone in Seminary Ridge who joined us this evening to listen to the candidates. I think we've learned a lot about their positions on issues affecting our community. Again, thank you to Mike Souza for being our moderator this evening, and to Richie Weiblinger for making this fourth forum run so smoothly. We greatly appreciate your time and effort. Remember, the Democrat primary is on Tuesday, June 8th, and it is open to all registered voters in Alexandria. Mark your calendars and remember to vote. Finally, best wishes to both of the candidates this evening. We wish you the best. Good night, and I hope to see everyone in line and ready to vote on Tuesday, June 8th. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.